Everyone to a special episode of Legend Makers recorded for our con Legend Haven. Today we are joined by Deacon Nicholas Kotar. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes, finally, somebody pronouncing it right.
Fantastic. I've been following you for a little while. I saw you on Jonathan Pajot's interview on discussion on strange storytelling. I just had to have you come and present. So grateful you could come join us. I know that you've got some laryngitis for this call, so I'll keep my questions as short and to the point as I can.
Thank you.
Deacon Kotar is a writer of epic fantasy inspired by Russian fairy tales. He's also a freelance translator from Russian to English. There's just a lot of things in this bio here. It's just amazing. He lives in the middle of cow country. He's a Grammy-nominated vocalist, and he's looking for blue police boxes that are bigger on the inside. So if you get that reference, well, you're part of a special club. What I really wanted to ask you today is why is there this need for strange storytelling? And you recently took a course or something where you immersed yourself in new ways of approaching the craft of writing and allowing that to affect how your faith-inspired fiction is generated, is created. And what is that? What is strange storytelling, and why is that something that's important?
Yeah, that answer, or the answer to that question took over an hour with Jonathan Pajot. So we're gonna do a short version. But the short version, and I'm assuming we have an audience that understands where I'm coming from already. So I'm not gonna do the usual thing and describe in detail the problem that we're dealing with. But I think we can all agree that the storytelling of our time is largely broken. I mean, most of us, if we're talking about the books that we love, we don't talk about recent books that were published. And we're not really talking about the most recent blockbuster movie. There really aren't any blockbuster movies anymore. There really aren't any bestsellers in the publishing space. And recently, the publishing industry revealed itself quite terrible scrutiny in the antitrust trial brought by the Department of Justice, where basically they admitted that even the big five, such as they are, big trade publishers in the United States, actually don't know what the heck they're doing. And this is almost straight from the horse's mouth. So this is a weird time. It's a time when everybody craves more than ever to have stories that unify, especially in the wake of the pandemic. But it's hard to find those stories, and more often than not, the stories that should be heroic, the stories that should uplift us, are uncomfortable with any kind of sincere heroism, uncomfortable with virtue, and would prefer to laugh at it all, and would prefer to lampoon it all, and would prefer to kind of ironically look at it with a raised eyebrow from a distance, and kind of give you an elbow to the ribs and say, "Aren't they silly?" The sort of Shrekization of classical storytelling.
What a great verb!
Yes. So that being the case, what can we do as Christian storytellers? A question that I've been thinking about and talking about and listening to other people about for many years, and I don't know that I have any answers, but I certainly have some ideas. One of which is was suggested to me by some very interesting new converts to Orthodox Christianity, Paul Kingsnorth being one of them, and soon-to-be Orthodox Christian Martin Shaw, famous storyteller. And
he's amazing. Yes,
he really is. Yeah, but I've been reading both of them and speaking to one of them extensively recently, and it occurs to me they often talk about the fact that whenever the center is messed up, whenever the center is broken, you want to go out to the margins to find wisdom. And certainly in the tradition of our own Christian faith, it's oftentimes the hermits, the crazy ascetics from the desert that come back into the city to tell us all that we're not living up to our end of the bargain. So in terms of storytelling, I think it might be an interesting and a useful thing to do is to become, in terms of storytelling, the hermit, the crazy prophet who stands on top of a pillar, the dendrite, the Mary of Egypt. And practically speaking, what can that mean? And I don't know. That's what I'm exploring right now, and that's something that I began to get an intimation of in this course that you mentioned, which was a course called Rewilding Your Words. It's a course that Paul Kingsnorth offers and has offered for years now, and since the pandemic, it's gone exclusively online. But it used to be offered in person, And my experience of this course was quite interesting. And I can talk a little bit about that if you want to. But
I'm curious about its impact on you, like rewilding. You're already introducing us to a whole sphere of storytelling that a lot of us in the First World West may have never heard of, with Russian fairy tales and so on. So for you to be already introducing us to the fringes, and then you go to the fringes of the fringe in terms of actual physical contact with what Martin Shaw is doing with actual enchanted reality and so on.
Yeah.
What is that inspiring in you?
Well, as much as I'm maybe culturally steeped in the wilds of Russian fairy tales, the honest truth is that I'm a city boy, and I've only moved into cow country fairly recently. So my heart belongs to the forest, but my mind is stuck in the city, and I'm trying to get it unstuck from there as much as possible. And I guess when it comes to telling stories, that becomes manifested most obviously in the kind of story that you tell. And for me, that I've always tried to emulate, to be a kind of in the long view, to try to do what Tolkien did, in the sense of creating a world, a secondary world that's strongly steeped in the traditions and legends and stories of an entire nation, except to do it from the Russian perspective. But what Tolkien did was, nobody can really replicate it, because the man was so deep, and the man was so erudite, and he had so much technical mastery of various forms of writing. In our internet age, it's probably impossible to get that level of just competence as a scholar, and probably impossible to get that deep as he was. It's just there's too many distractions. So for me, I didn't even realize how necessary it was for me. I went to the course just because I wanted to get to know Paul, because Paul was such a interesting and fascinating person. And honestly, I thought, well, it might be interesting for me to do this rewilding your words kind of thing, because I know that for myself as a writer of fantasy, I want the wildness of my settings to become more evocative to the reader. And as a city person, it's difficult to describe a quest when you haven't quested. It's difficult to describe a countryside when you've lived amidst ugly stucco-covered buildings, right? So for the last 10 years, I've lived in a more rural setting, but still, old habits are hard to break. So this was I didn't really know what I was getting into, but it ended up being a really transformative experience, partially because of the course itself. But really, what he offers isn't all that complicated. It's just forcing yourself to unplug from this ever-connected world of distractions, and simply be in a place for a while. And it's not even all that radical. I mean, Martin Shaw does these wilderness vigils where people are taken for 4 days out into the wilderness, and they don't move from their place, and they don't eat for 4 days. So that kind of transformation must be like. But this was something much less. However, it was. I took it on the cusp of the first week of Lent, and I live and work in a monastery setting, where the services during the first week are extensive. They're about 10-12 hours a day during the first week, and we're in church every day for the first week. We don't do anything else except church, effectively, and kind of sleep between the services. So that experience in itself is the one that tends to break you spiritually, and it's supposed to, because you're supposed to see yourself as you are. But to have this experience of creative breaking right on the cusp of the spiritual breaking was incredible. It was very intense, and it thank God it didn't. Thank God I was prepared for it a little bit, because I had been writing for years, so I had something to work with. But I think if a novice, in the sense of writing abilities, had tried to do this and then delved deep into the spiritual underworld of Lent, I think there could be some dangers there. So for me, it really broke me, and I started to write poetry for the first time in 25 years. It was very strange.
Wow.
Yeah, and it really did change my my perspective and my understanding of what storytelling can be, or what it should be, because too often people in the independent publishing space, people who self-publish their own books, who don't want to go through the sort of gatekeeping mechanism of traditional publishing for various reasons. There could be all kinds of reasons. For me, it's a matter less of the gatekeepers and more of control over my intellectual property, which is a different conversation. But from in that world, the gurus and the specialists, they tend to give you sort of one set of advice, and that's, if you want to be successful financially, you have to follow the market, at least to some degree, right? If you're not going to commit totally to writing to market, so to speak, meaning just constantly regurgitating tropey fiction over and over again, and basically writing, I don't know, something like vampire romance, Amish vampire romance in outer space or something like this over and over and over again.
Again,
yeah, right. That's the thing that was drilled into me, and so I kept trying to, I couldn't write out of that completely, because I write out of a spiritual necessity as much as a physical one. So I could never fully write to market, but I was still very much hung up on trying to conform to some sort of external model that is in fact quite arbitrary, because nobody really knows what makes a successful book. And then it made me see this experience of being out in nature, kind of hugging trees literally, and kind of allowing for the spirit of the natural world to inhabit my creative space in a way that the setting itself begins to speak through you, and begins to suggest perhaps ideas that are not your own, in a kind of collaborative effort between your mind and your heart and the larger world around you. It created this new story that I just recently finished, and it's quite different from some other things that I've written. And both in the writing and in the thinking of it, it's a lot, I don't know, it just feels a lot more real, a lot more natural, a lot more exciting, electric to write in that kind of way, where you're not simply forcing preconceived notions into a mold that's supposed to make your book sellable, but rather you allow for the story to kind of go in its own direction.
Yeah. That's so intriguing. And what intrigues me about that in particular is, like you said, one, not necessarily following the market, but this is, I think, is the role of the storyteller or the creator, maybe, is to immerse ourselves in the fringes, to come back and provide a sense of fresh leadership to, shall we say, the market. But just before, like half an hour ago, I was watching your talk about the most important role in life is to be a storyteller. And you make this really powerful point in it where you're like, what was it? Oh, stories actually have a function and a format and a purpose because it resonates with something primal and real. And you can't just deconstruct stories and do whatever you want because, well, it's not a story, it's not effective, nobody else wants to read it. Hey, if you want to go do it for yourself, that's fine. But if you actually hope to make an impact with other people, or you actually want to share something real, can you speak to that? Because those seem to be slightly in tension of, rewilding yourself and then at the same time honoring the tried and true.
Well, so rewilding yourself has to do with the personal creative transformation that allows for you to be guided by voices that are outside you. And those voices could be the wild, but they could be tradition. They could be Camelot, or they could be the Green Chapel, right? And I think the tension between the two of them.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful.
That's Martin Shaw. So he's right now he's in the process of retelling Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in his own way. And if I can pitch his Substack, he has a Substack. Everybody go sign up, because he just told the first part of it, and I'm telling you, it's incredible. It's almost better than the original. It's not, of course, but it in terms of a proper retelling, that's how you do it. So my thinking has I hope deepened a little bit since that talk that I did, because my preconceived notion, I think, in that talk was that there is a kind of structure, there's a kind of underlying expectation that is primal to the human experience and universally that resonates with all people. It's a thought that Tolkien offers in his essay on fairy stories, where he suggests that there's something about the quest, the heroic quest, that is universal to the human experience, and it keeps showing up in the storytelling traditions of various peoples, no matter where they seem to be on the earth. Now, I often get pushback when I say this, because quite rightly, the storytelling traditions of of Africa and the storytelling traditions of the East, China, etc., are going to have different emphases, and you're going to have slightly. They're not all going to look like Western European or North Scandinavian type stories. That being said, there are it's undeniable that there are certain movements, certain themes, certain tropes in the positive sense that do appear in all cultures, in places where they couldn't have had any sort of cultural interaction. So it seems like there is something about a certain kind of rhythm, a certain kind of story that just appeals to human beings. And Tolkien's point is a kind of a radical one, and that is that what he believes that to be part of the image and likeness that was laid. He doesn't quite phrase it in this way, but basically what it has to do with humanity being created in the image of a creative God. So since we are sub-creators, we can be sub-creators. We can reflect the image of a creator by creating secondary worlds while he created a primary world. And that reflection of the primary cause is seen in the deep affinity for storytelling and for some storytelling tropes, especially those that are then reflected in history in the life of Christ himself. So something about self-sacrifice, something about a single person taking on the sufferings of many, something about the redemption of passing through the underworld and coming back up, not through your own power, but through the I have to be careful theologically here, but through the power of the divine that is in you because of your intercessory sacrifice, right? Something like that. And my point was that if we really want to tell great stories, the more we reflect the rhythms and themes that appear in the gospel, the closer we are aligning ourselves to the model of the great story, of the story that became history, right? So there's something about being able to tell us that kind of story well that has an attractive effect to a whole lot of people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm so excited to go read that thing you mentioned by Martin Shaw, and I hope others go do that too. And this is what I love about your use of the word rewilding and strangeness and so on, because Camelot is the best of human tradition that we can offer. But then the Green Chapel is the emergence of the numinous in creation. And if you live too much in one or the other, you end up with problems. And the human must live in a tension of both. And I really do see storytellers and authors being the kind of people who do go out in the wilds and then bring that back to Camelot, and
we are the
then vice versa. Yeah, exactly. And so there's a role where there's almost always a sense of strangeness about an author, the things they want to talk about, things that interest them, that slightly unnerve everybody else. But it's because they're doing this this line walking between these two worlds. Deacon, we did not spend enough time on anything, but I hope that people can benefit from this. Where can they find you online? I mean, you recently just did a Kickstarter that was successful, and you have a ton of things going on your website. Where can folk find you online?
Well, you can find me on my website, nicholaskotar.com. The Kickstarter you mentioned is still going, and I think it will be going when this con is going on. It'll be in its final days. Don't be deterred by the success. Some people, I think, they see that it's done well, and they're like, I don't need to help. The point of the Kickstarter actually is to demonstrate to other Christian creators that there is a way of making your stories a reality by using the crowdfunding model. So the more support I can get, the more I will then make a point of telling other people, look, this is how it's done. So hopefully it'll be useful and helpful for a lot of people, not simply for myself.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Deacon, thank you so much for coming on. And for those who haven't yet explored his work or read his novels, just downloaded one myself and I'm working through that and enjoying that. Visit, what was the name of the website again?
NicholasKotar.com.
NicholasKotar.com. Perfect. And for those who are checking out the con and have not yet explored what Legend Fiction is, it's a creative community for Catholic and Orthodox fiction writers. It's a place for you to give and get feedback, share your works in progress, and maybe double or triple your writing output because you're having so much fun. Come and check us out sometime at LegendFiction.com. Thanks again, Deacon. Thanks again to everybody. Enjoy the con. God bless you.
Thank you.